Welcome to Chew Diligence, a podcast about people, places, and other important things on the Kansas City food scene. I'm Jill Silva. My co-host Lindsay Shively is on maternity leave, but we'll be back in the pod studio for our next conversation with Chef Andrew Longris and key players of the American Restaurant in Crown Center, a dining institution that is celebrating its 45th anniversary and a record 20th consecutive year hosting a James Beard Foundation dinner. Today, my guest is the renowned chocolatier Christopher Elbow. His wares include handcrafted bonbons, a bean-to-bar line, drinking chocolate, not to mention ice cream and soon donuts and coffee. He grew up in Liberty, got his bachelor's degree in restaurant management and business management from the University of Nebraska, and was the head of pastry chef at Emeril Lagasse's Delmonico in Las Vegas. He got his start in the world of chocolate by creating unique truffles and bonbons while working as the pastry chef at the American Restaurant. Since 2003, he's built his own chocolate empire and is recognized as one of the best in his chosen profession. Welcome to Chew Diligence, Christopher Elbow.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You brought some lovely things along with you today, and I'm going to eat them really soon, but not before I wear them.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about this new Valentine's Day item, because we're not that far away from the chocolate holiday of the year. It is the chocolate holiday of the year.
It is the chocolate holiday of the year,
Okay.
especially for us. But this year we created something a little different. We kind of wanted to go off the beaten path a little bit. You know, we always do heart-shaped chocolates and things that are pink and red and Valentine's Day themed. So we kind of were talking about different things, and we had this idea toying around last year, but we weren't able to execute it in time. So we created what we're calling our tattoo collection. And when we were talking about non-traditional Valentine's Day, something kind of, a saying kind of was born that not every Valentine's fits into a heart-shaped box. Not everybody celebrates Valentine's Day. So we wanted to kind of pay homage to them a little bit. So we've created 3 collections, and when you open the box, the design appears to be kind of an old-fashioned tattoo, kind of a classic tattoo look with different sayings on them. So we have one with a skull that says "Till Death," another one that's with a rose that's "True Love," and then we can't forget about mom. So we did that classic mom tattoo, with the heart, and each one comes with a temporary tattoo to have some fun with.
I like it. And do you have a tattoo, or do you wear the temporary tattoo?
I wear the temporary tattoos. I haven't gotten my real one yet.
And did you get together with tattoo artists at all, or can you just do this on your own as a chocolate expert?
We didn't consult any tattoo artists, but we think that might be a fun thing next year. So far, the response has been really great, but we thought maybe next year we partner with some local tattoo artists to create, their own unique designs.
That is not at all surprising me, because you are such a collaborator over the years. You have done lots of different collaborations. Another one that for Valentine's Day was with Boulevard, the chocolate ale, and that was wildly successful.
Yeah.
Is that continuing at this point? Or?
Yeah, so they took a couple years off, but they released it again this year, about a month ago, and it's still proves to be wildly successful. And my understanding is that's their number one requested beer from customers.
Wow. Okay, that's
a little mind-boggling.
It
they make a lot of great beer. So
absolutely. What do you think it is about the chocolate ale that really captures people's attention?
I don't know if I've been able to pinpoint that, over the years. I know some of it at the beginning was, usually the first time something's done, everybody's excited about it and crazy about it. But this has had some lasting appeal, and coming out around Valentine's Day, I think it's a good product, if somebody's not a wine drinker, that they can share it with their loved ones on Valentine's Day.
I remember when that first came out, there were lines like a rock concert.
Yeah, people were banging on the back of our chocolate shop door, and, we couldn't sell alcohol, so we didn't have any,
Yeah.
People would see me in a parking lot or in a store, and how do you have some?
I think I texted you as well. Where's my bottle?
So when that comes out, I just typically shut my phone off and kind of go into hibernation for a few days until the excitement wears off.
That's really a very fun fun legacy to have, for sure. Do you
Yeah.
feel like a rock star? I mean, you are referred to over and over and over in media as the Willy Wonka of Kansas City, the Willy Wonka of the nation, the Candy Man.
Right.
How do you wear that title? Would you prefer a different one, or do you like that one?
I appreciate it. I don't necessarily, look or, seek out that kind of attention. I would be happy just being in the kitchen and, kind of playing behind the scenes. So, but we embrace it, and as, not only me, but as a company that, people see us in that kind of role, and we honor it, and we'll, have fun with it.
Okay, so which version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory do you prefer?
Hands down, the original. No question.
Yeah, the other one was a little
dark and kind of, I don't know. It was fun to see another reincarnation of it, but it's funny because I just watched the original the other night. It was on TV, so you can never get tired of that movie.
There's something about it that's just kind of magical, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of chocolate is this really great thing. It's it's a luxury. It's people tend to have very strong feelings about chocolate, one way or the other. So it's just kind of this food that has this pull over people.
Absolutely. Now, let's back up for people who don't know how you got into chocolate in the first place. It has a connection to the American restaurant, actually, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of where we started experimenting with chocolate. We would send chocolates out at the end of the meal with a check, kind of as a minard and a, thank you. And it became one of my favorite kind of job duties. Exploring with the different ways to decorate chocolates and the different flavor combinations that you typically don't associate with chocolate. And this company was born out of customers asking if they could buy them. And before that, I never saw myself, owning a chocolate company or just specializing in chocolate. So it was kind of out of left field a little bit. I was actually ready to, getting a little weary of the restaurant business at that time, and I had applied to go back to school for architecture. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something in this chocolate. I'll give it 1 year. We'll see what happens, and I can always go back to school. But thankfully, I'm not an architect.
Well, now the architecture world may say that's their loss.
Sure.
Interesting differences here. I mean, is there anything similar about architecture and chocolate? What would have drawn you to architecture?
I think so. I think there's a lot of parallels between the two, and I often look to inspiration, at museums, read architecture books, looking at spaces and lines, and how can we adapt that to chocolate or pastry. So I don't think it was too big of a stretch, but I'm just so happy that I'm a chocolatier. So.
It's a happier
I think
thing,
we make people happy, and
yeah.
and there's not a day that goes by that I regret that decision to do this instead.
But chocolate's so much more temporary. We pop it in our mouth, it's gone, and a building could have lasted forever.
That's true. I hope our company lasts forever, though, and we keep making people happy.
There you go. So do you have a Oompa Loompa succession plan?
We have great people. Yeah, we have I've got employees that have been with me 12 and 11 and 10 years. So I have an awesome team, and wouldn't really be able to do what we do without all of everybody's contribution.
So when you started doing chocolate, was it just because you were mostly interested in, you were a pastry chef at the time, correct?
Correct.
And so, that seems like something a pastry chef might want to play around with a little bit. Or did you know what you were getting into? Did you know much about chocolate? Did you even like chocolate as a kid?
I liked chocolate as a kid. I liked sweets. I don't know if I really understood the bigger picture of what I was getting into. I certainly never envisioned getting our company to where it is this day when I started. You know, I kind of had this romantic notion that I'd be in a little room making bonbons and, you know, working, you know, a normal, you know, person schedule as opposed to a restaurant schedule. And my wife makes me eat those words all the time when I'm working those 20-hour days at Christmas. But, I worked a lot with chocolate in different forms, you know, with baking and, you know, ice creams and pastry. But what I did always like about the pastry world is that we have more time to play with our food than hot food, savory food, so to speak, if that's a good way to say it. It can be molded. It can be, you know, it's very malleable and can be worked with much like an artist would work with, you know, bronze or paint or, you know, things like that. So that was the initial appeal to me, not so much the taste and the flavor of chocolate, because that has actually really evolved over the past 16 years that we've been in the business.
You have really, we'll start from the outside, really beautiful chocolates. And you were kind of, at least for me, very early on, that was the first chocolate that I was like, wow, this looks really contemporary and looks like a piece of art. And especially if you looked at the 21 box, it was like, oh my gosh, you know, it looks like you were looking at a bunch of jewels. Where did that sort of come from?
We weren't, you know, we can't take credit for being the first person to, you know, color and decorate chocolates. It's kind of been done for a while, but I think we can take credit for taking it to another level. And typically, you know, and out of this kind of this American style of chocolate was born, you know, that you have French chocolate, you have Belgian and Swiss, and they all have their own kind of unique styles. And I think we can be credited with helping craft an American style of chocolate using bright colors, and each piece has its own identity. And then also from the flavor standpoint, bold flavors, you know, not real subtle flavors, kind of maybe like a typical French chocolate would be, and then more unique flavor combinations that you typically wouldn't associate with chocolate.
And let's talk about some of my favorites. There's almost all the caramel ones. As you know, I can come in and just put together a whole box of nothing but caramel.
You're not alone there.
We've got fleur de sel caramel, rosemary caramel, coffee caramel, lavender caramel, coconut caramel, and passion fruit caramel. And I'm sure there are others, but those are the ones I pulled off the site the other day. Then you also had some really interesting flavors along the lines of pistachio bergamot, butterscotch bourbon, strawberry balsamic, calamansi, lime, Aztec spice. Those are really unique flavors. Talk a little bit about the process of trying to put those flavors together. I think I even remember saffron being in one at one point in time. I mean, who thinks of saffron and chocolate?
We do.
Touche.
So that the flavor process, you know, we while some of those might sound really unique and challenging, we never do anything that doesn't work or make sense in our mind. So I think we have pretty approachable and kind of normal flavors. Excuse me. The process for kind of our, you know, we like to change our flavors or add 4 or 5 new ones to the line every year. And I don't know how many we've done over the years, hundreds and hundreds. So it's getting a little more challenging to come up with new flavor combinations that work and make sense. But we practice somewhat of a level of restraint. It might not look that way with our product, but we typically try to limit it to no more than 2 key flavors in a bonbon. I think I see a lot of new people on the market trying to put in 5, 6, 7 things, and you just lose that. Chocolate is a very strong flavor on its own, so our whole goal is to balance whatever flavor we're putting into it with that chocolate flavor. You don't want one or the other to overrun the other. So that's always where we start. And if it doesn't work, you know, we go back to the drawing board and keep working on it. Not to say that a particular flavor won't ever make sense with chocolate. We just need to maybe approach it in a different way. Maybe it's a caramel, maybe it's a ganache, or, you know, a fruit jelly or something, some other way to infuse that flavor into the bonbon that's a little more successful.
So do you do all the flavor profiles, or do you have input, or, you know, is it a research and development team? How does that work?
They don't all come from me. The staff that has been with me for 12 years, they have come to learn what I expect. So, and I think creating new bonbons, both from the aesthetics and the flavor, is one of the funnest parts of the job. So we always, make sure the team is involved in that. So it is a very collaborative effort.
And then talk a little bit about the difference between European and American, because you're telling us kind of you're at the forefront of American chocolate. How does that differ from the rest of the world?
I think really it is just like, if you had to sum it up in one sentence, it's the bold flavors. And I love French chocolate. I think French bonbons are typically my favorite, but they're very subtle. They're very restrained and reserved. We want you to know exactly what flavor it is when you put that in your mouth. So, we achieve that by using real ingredients and not extracts. Mm-hmm. So if we're making something with fresh mint or a mint flavor, it is fresh mint leaves steeped in the cream and not, an extract. Or we want it to taste like you just walked out to your garden and ate a piece of chocolate with a mint leaf. So that's kind of in how I would differentiate the American style of chocolate making. We're using the same techniques that they've used in Europe for hundreds of years, so that hasn't changed, other than the decorating, the painting. Mm-hmm. But you take all of that away, we're making chocolate the same way they made it hundreds of years ago in Belgium and France and Switzerland.
So I'm curious about the chocolate, the actual chocolate. What are we talking about? Because we hear a lot about percentages, and what does that mean? I mean, are you doing milk chocolate or dark chocolate or somewhere in the middle? And how do you decide when to use what kind of chocolate?
We primarily we use, I would call it almost a semi-sweet chocolate, but the percentage, when you see that on a package note, really dictates, how much of that bar or how much of that chocolate comes from the cacao bean. That includes cocoa butter. So if you see a 70% dark chocolate, 70% of what's in that bar came from the cacao bean, and then the other 30% would typically be sugar. So really, one of the only kind of safe things you can conclude from that is how sweet that bar is going to be. So an 80%, it's going to be a lot less sweet than a 70 and a 60. Typical American chocolates, semi-sweets, probably in the 50% range. Our custom blend that we have, and it's made by a very well-renowned chocolate maker in France called Valrhona, is a 63% dark chocolate. And we crafted that really to make sure that we had a kind of a blank canvas, if that makes sense, because we throw a lot of flavors at that chocolate. So we need something that's really going to work with a lot of different flavors. Chocolate can run the gamut in flavors from fruity to nutty to earthy, and we kind of want something in the middle, of that kind of flavor circle that will work with everything. So that's kind of our base chocolate, and then from there, we do a little bit of white chocolate where we think it's appropriate. Typically, it's with more acidic fruits like passion fruit and lemon, because you've got that acid that cuts through the sweetness and the fattiness of the milk. We do a little bit of milk chocolate, not so much, and then we also do a lot of like single origin dark chocolates. So a chocolate from a specific country that we'll craft into a bonbon, and we don't put any secondary flavor in that because we want you to appreciate and understand, how chocolate can differ from region to region.
And that sort of was the catalyst for the bean to bar line that you've been introducing in the last couple of years. And I have a couple of bars in front of me that you were nice enough to bring along. And I see Brazil. Notice how you put Brazil right on the top. Husband's from Brazil, in case anybody's wondering. 70% dark, Haiti, 72%, Vietnam, 72%, and Dominican Republic, 72%. So what's going on here? I don't understand. I mean, if we're just looking at percentages, 3 of these have the same percent.
Yeah, so the bean to bar line was somewhat born out of, I think I went to my first cacao plantation in 2011 in Madagascar, and it was the first time I ever saw how chocolate or how cacao, which would be the correct pronunciation for the fruit, was grown and how difficult it was and how many steps it goes through before it gets to the end consumer as chocolate. The farmers were super proud of what they created. A lot of them have never tasted chocolate, so they only know this as an agricultural product, as a fruit, something they grow. And
What does it taste like as a fruit? Have you tasted it?
oh yeah, the beans are almost inedible, actually. So
Okay.
it's the seed of a pod.
Right.
And when you open the pod up, there's this citrusy pulp that surrounds each bean, and that is still one of my favorite experiences to this day, is to pop the seed in your mouth and just kind of suck on that pulp. It's citrusy, it's floral sometimes, sweet, and that's actually what a couple things I've learned over the years is why the beans are so bitter. That's kind of a reproductive method for cacao. They rely on the animals to get in there and suck the pulp off and spit the seed out to to reproduce.
How romantic.
Yeah. But cacao is one of the few things that doesn't, when it rots, it doesn't fall from the tree. So it doesn't have a way, an apple drops, seed spread, you grow new trees.
Right.
Cacao doesn't do that. So it's developed over the years to have this really bitter, astringent, tannic taste to it. And then it's the farmer's jobs at that point to ferment the bean correctly to start getting rid of some of those bitter flavors. And it really isn't until that fermentation process that you actually start kind of making the connection between this fruit and chocolate. The aromas and color start to develop. And then after the fermentation process, it dries for another 5 to 7 days. And then at that point, it would come up or be shipped off to a chocolate maker. And up until this time, or about 2 years ago, we've bought all of our chocolate from Valrhona in France and melt it and transform it into, what we do. But we really wanted to find a way to have more of a connection to the farmers and the places we get this chocolate from. And then also celebrate the fact that it is a lot like wine and coffee. This tastes different depending on where it's grown. There's different varietals, and when you sit 4 of these in front of you, it's awesome to see people, make that connection. And they had no idea that this even existed. A lot of people don't understand, or they think chocolate's a manufactured product, in a factory, but there's a huge agricultural front to that before it even gets to the factory that we really want to kind of promote some awareness over.
And so to do that, you've been traveling quite a bit. Tell us, pick a place you went to recently and tell us a little bit about that.
Our most recent trip last year was to Nicaragua and Honduras. Chocolate grows basically 20 degrees north and south of the equator, so we kind of have that tropical belt. And Central America and South America were really kind of that's where chocolate originated. And we would go to several farms, see several different types of operations, and kind of really what we walk away with is how difficult it is to farm cacao. It's something that can't be mechanized. It's very susceptible to disease. Even a healthy farm typically loses about 30% of their crop to 1 or 2 of these kind of prolific diseases. And getting it to market, like the whole, we're in remote places. I mean, one of the farms we went to, we had to take an 1.5-hour plane ride, land on, I wouldn't call it a runway, that would be generous.
A landing strip?
A landing dirt strip, and then take a canoe up a river 1.5 hours to get to this farm.
Wow.
So whenever I'm in a place like that, it boggles my mind that something from here ends up in Kansas City.
That's wild. Now, how do you find these people? How do you know to get in the canoe and paddle upstream?
So we always work with, there's a network of people that seek out these farms and other chocolate makers, and now there's importers that are specializing in kind of the small farm beans. So we have a lot of connections that way, and that's how we typically, our whole goal would be to visit every farm that we're getting cacao from. And, somewhat of as assurance of, letting the farmers know that, hey, we're going to be here to buy your beans. And then also to know that they're doing things right, and you'll hear a lot in the news, ethical chocolate, social responsibility, and things like that. And there's a lot of challenges in the chocolate world. We're buying from such small farms and in such small quantities that we're able to really be selective on where we get our product from. And, we don't want to turn our back on places that have challenges. So, we see that as our responsibility. Okay, we're not ready to buy from you yet, but what can we do to help you get there? So out of that, actually, we're creating a foundation, and part of the proceeds of the sales of all of our bean to bar and craft chocolate items will go to that foundation, and really kind of a broad mission to help the farmers, their families, and the workers in the regions we're buying cacao from.
Have you made like a personal relationship? Do you have a farmer that you know somewhere in the world that you're thinking he or she, I'm assuming, it could be a family too, is growing that for me right now, and gee, I wonder how that crop's going to be. And
yeah, in Nicaragua was great because we actually had the opportunity to stay with the farmers in their homes.
Wow!
And in this particular little region, most chocolate's grown by very, very small farms, and they put it together as a co-op. And the company, it's a not-for-profit that's really helped this region kind of come together as a community and create a really, really nice business. Cacao is typically a secondary crop for a lot of people. More than likely, especially in Nicaragua, coffee would be more lucrative.
Mm-hmm.
But what they've seen over the years in helping this community is they have kind of flipped that. So they're growing better cacao, they're paying more attention to it, we're getting better beans and quality, they're getting more money as a result of that. And the communities have really come together. So to see that firsthand is great. Makes us feel really good about, what we're doing. Absolutely.
One thing that I think is different in having eaten through many of these bars is that we need to be clear, it's not a candy bar.
No, it's not a candy bar at all. We actually, the term candy typically never, is talked about in our shop. Even the bonbons, while they are technically candy, we call them confections, and, I think the quality of ingredients and chocolate we're putting into it kind of can support that. But with the craft chocolate especially, kind of the way a lot of people consume that, and the way I like to consume that is just little squares at the end of the meal, of 2 to 3 different kinds. You get to kind of taste in between them. I have my favorites. People develop their favorites, so they'll kind of come back to it. But the idea is to not sit down and eat a whole chocolate bar at one time. This is really something that's, an experience. And this is what we've noticed very early on about even our bonbons it's kind of this great small luxury you can have every day, for very little money. Sure, a chocolate bar might be $10, but it's going to last, if you consume it kind of how we consume it, it's going to last you 2 weeks.
Now, I remember buying a box of bonbons for my grandmother, and she was overwhelmed by the beauty of it. So much so, she didn't want to eat them.
We've heard that a lot.
Wanted to save them. I think we found some in the closet once upon a time that she'd been saving. So, I mean, it's something to covet, but it's really a fresh product, right? And we should be eating this.
Yeah, the bonbons you should eat, you shouldn't hold those for more than a week or two. Some of them, the caramels have a little bit of a longer shelf life, but the fresh ganache pieces, we don't use preservatives. And this was the biggest challenge we faced when we first started back in 2003, was educating the consumer that these aren't drugstore chocolates that are meant to sit on a shelf for a year before you buy them. Fresh cream, fresh butter, fresh ingredients, fresh fruits that will go bad, no different than, food in your refrigerator at home. So we encourage people to consume them within 10 to 12 days of purchase. So the chocolate bars are a little different. Those, can last a year if kept in good condition. So that's why I think, I know I'm not the typical consumer, but I have hundreds of chocolate bars in my office from, all these chocolate producers around the world. And, I just eat them, I'll go through them eventually.
Whose bar do you really like or enjoy? What chocolate maker do you look to and get inspiration from?
One of my favorites actually is a native Missourian, Alan McClure from Patrick Chocolate down in Columbia. He's been in the business a long time and is one of the most talented chocolate makers. And the whole idea of making chocolate is almost the opposite of making bonbons. So the flavor's already there. You just have to uncover it and not mess it up. It's much like a really good chef will take a great piece of fish and, don't screw it up.
Right.
Let that great ingredient speak on its own. And so that's kind of how we've, over the last 2 years, as we've been learning to make chocolate, is, there's acids and things in there that we don't want. So our job is to get rid of those things and just uncover the natural flavor of what's there. And Alan is by far, a master of that. He specializes in Madagascar cacao, which is one of my favorite origins, due to its really citrusy and kind of red fruit characteristics. And, I don't know how he does it, but, you almost eat that and you think that he's put raspberries in there or these other things, but those are all natural flavors.
So do you guys know each other?
Yeah. I remember when he first started, he helped me out a little bit or I helped him a little bit on learning how to temper chocolate and cast chocolate, and now it's kind of come full circle. I'm emailing him questions on, bean to bar chocolate that when I get stuck. So
one thing that I think people don't know is that we have also Askinosie nearby. So we have 3 really, at least nationally, if not internationally famous chocolate makers right here in the Missouri area. How does that happen exactly? Is that an accident?
Just coincidence. Yeah, no, I don't think people came to Missouri to do it, but yeah, it is kind of a unique thing for Missouri to have.
The craft chocolate movement is really taken off, and a lot of that's been in the span of your business cycle. How have people changed the idea of what chocolate is, or expanded on the idea of what chocolate is? Because I think I grew up with a Hershey bar. My great-grandfather, that was the treat. Is before we left him, he would give us 6 Hershey bars. And you were supposed to hang on to those, you know, and he was being extravagant. And I remember I didn't really like them. But I didn't tell him. I took them and
yeah, we've watched, over the 16 years I've been in business, we've watched this craft chocolate movement evolve. When I first started, nobody was quite doing it yet. And then maybe 2 to 3 years in, I started seeing, I saw Alan McClure, and there was another gentleman in Colorado, Steve DeVries, who was kind of one of the pioneers of the bean to bar movement. And what's kind of cool is that this is almost uniquely an American phenomenon.
Really?
Other countries are now in it, over the past 5 to 6 years, but this was kind of born in America, this small, craft production of small batch chocolate. And it's made people a lot more aware of cacao, of chocolate, where it comes from. And, and a good example of that is going to any Whole Foods and you've got 100 different chocolate bars to choose from now. Back in 2003, there was, 10 maybe, or a lot of different flavored chocolates and things like that. So it's been really neat to watch this evolve over the years. And, we had the intention to get into that market a long time ago, but it just took a lot more research and a lot more time, especially on learning how to make chocolate. It's just a different skill set than what we had typically practiced prior to that.
You have a new space in which to do this, and you said now everybody's under one roof describe a little bit about what's going on at the new factory and why that's going to change your production.
So we moved into a new factory in September. We were previously operating under 3 buildings, and it was just, that's how we grew. We kind of cobbled together and grew how we could with the resources we had, but we were just bursting at the seams at all 3 places, and communication and transportation and logistics. It was just getting too challenging. So we were able to find a building over by the roastery on Holly Street and refurbish it and get everything under one roof except for the retail operation.
So you'll keep that?
We'll keep that at 1819 McGee. So we'll keep that. And we used to make all of our bonbons behind the glass. When you go in, you can see back there. And when we moved out, we were thinking, well, this is going to be empty. We don't want customers to look at an empty space. So that kind of gave birth to the idea of doing our craft chocolate, our bean to bar line there, but then take it a step further and create an experience. So we're in the process of developing, I don't know what the right term is, museum, chocolate experience, but our whole idea is to have tours and bring people in, teach them about the history of cacao, where it comes from, how it's been used over the years, how it's evolved into modern time. And then they'll be able to see every step of the chocolate making process, taste everything along the way, and hopefully leave with a better understanding. I think we're trying to identify one key thing that we want them to leave with, and I think if anything, if they're in the grocery store next time and looking at chocolate, that they give it a little extra thought on what chocolate they're going to select to consume.
So what should the label say?
Really, on a dark chocolate, there should only be, 2, maybe 3 ingredients in it, and that's cacao mass and sugar and maybe additional cocoa butter, if there's much else in it. Sometimes there's vanilla in chocolate that's kind of become synonymous with chocolate because it's been used in chocolate for hundreds of years. And then percentage-wise, kind of look at figure out what kind of your sweet spot on your percentage is. I always tell people a good starting spot would be right around 70% and determine, and that's how we typically, when we get a new origin in, the first thing we do is make a 70% chocolate. And we can gauge from there, based on the flavor profile, whether we can take it up. We typically wouldn't go down, do anything much less than 70. But pushing it up, I like 80, 85, for some origins work really well. There's one guy that has been super successful at doing 100%.
Is that possible? Wow.
It is, and I don't know how he does it because I haven't been successful at it yet. He's a guy up in New York called Fruition Chocolate that the 100% is one of my favorite bars on the market.
Wow. What does it taste like? Describe it.
So he's really worked hard at getting these really great fruit flavors and, eliminating any of the tannins and the astringency that a lot of people associate with dark chocolate. We have a lot of people come in our shop that, I don't like dark chocolate. Just,
Right.
And most of the time, by the time they leave, their kind of attitude has changed, and they're maybe think well, I guess I haven't had the right or a good dark chocolate yet.
I think my kids are they're like, why won't Chris do just a milk chocolate? And I'm like, well, taste it. And of course they love what you do, but there's always that person that wants some milk chocolate, I guess.
Well, and I love milk chocolate. I don't really consume a lot of it. And we actually started making one now. We have a bean to bar chocolate that we did a milk chocolate. It's a 50% dark milk chocolate, so it's got a lot more cacao flavor, but you still get the creaminess from the milk, and it is more sweet. And that's typically what I don't like about milk. Most milk chocolates is they're cloyingly sweet. But if you get the right milk, you can develop some really great kind of caramely, toasted milk flavors in the chocolate bar that are really fun.
So do you think in the new space that you're going to have, I mean, are people going to be able to sort of do a tasting to understand some of this, or are they just going to learn a little bit more about the process and visualize it?
No, a big part of it is the tasting.
Okay.
Like we talked about a little bit ago of really understanding that these do taste different depending on where they're grown. But we also want people to taste the beans themselves before it even, sees sugar or anything else, so they can kind of try to make that connection at the end of, tasting the bean. Now here's the finished product that took us, 4 to 5 days to make.
And when do you think that space is going to be ready? Because I want to get in line.
We hope in the fall. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us to get, we want to have a super accurate, depiction of cacao. But then the hardest part is trying to winnow that down into, we have people's attention for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I could make probably fill the Nelson with a the history of chocolate. So kind of carving out what are the key points and really, that are going to make sense and kind of drive home when they do taste the finished product, that it all kind of comes full circle.
So can you just describe what are the sort of stations or steps in chocolate making that you kind of want to illustrate so that we understand?
Yeah, there's about 5 or so. The first step would be sorting the beans. And this all has to be done by hand. This is super labor intensive.
There's no machine for this?
There is for big companies. It would take up probably our whole building if we found something like that. And a couple of the smaller chocolate makers have kind of, a lot of them are engineers, so they've kind of built their own equipment. But the first thing is to get rid of anything that's not going to make good chocolate. We find rocks, sticks, pieces of plastic, all kinds of strange things.
Not delicious.
And those aren't going to make good chocolate. And there's also, we have to pick out beans that are cracked and, things that might have the potential to have mold or insects in them. Mm-hmm. So the very first step is to do that sorting. And then once we have all that done, roasting is the very next thing we do. And this is where, as a chocolate maker, we kind of start to have control over what we want this to taste like. So the roasting profiles, and this is very much like coffee. It's done at longer time, lower temperature. It's kind of this slow and low roasting. And that's to drive off volatile acids and tannins and things that we don't want in our finished product, and then to help develop the chocolate flavor. We'll do 10, 12 different roast profiles on a bean before we kind of figure out, like, hey, here's how we need to treat this particular bean.
You're very meticulous. I've watched
it's very
you
methodical.
do this.
This is a very, we kind of follow the scientific approach when we're making chocolate, where we change one thing and see what it has on the outcome. Then the next time we change one more thing, see what that has on the outcome. And that's really the only way to understand, the processes and how that's going to affect the final chocolate. So after they roasted and cooled, then we have to get the shells off, and we do that with what's called a winnower. So we put the beans in and they get cracked, and then we have all the shell and the nib, which is the broken bean, together in one bucket, and we put it through a machine that takes the shells away. And then at that point, we've got our roasted nibs, and this is what I like eating, actually. So no sugar in them yet.
Yeah.
They haven't been refined. They're just great to eat a handful of, and put them on cereal, put them on ice cream.
They're supposed to be very, very good for you too.
Cacao is one of the highest antioxidant foods on the planet, and I always make sure I say cacao when I say that, because chocolate, some people come in and are like, I hear chocolate's healthy, and they'll load up on the bonbons and caramels, and I'm like, with all the cream and butter, and sugar we put in, we kind of probably defeated any. That's probably a net gain there. So, but once we have the nibs, then we formulate our recipe, and this is where we start getting into the percentages. So typically, we'll start with 70%. My personal style of chocolate, I like that kind of nice melt, so more of a European style. So we add additional cocoa butter. And that just helps with the mouthfeel and the way it kind of melts on your palate and opens up. So we'll do typically 5 to 8% additional cocoa butter. We don't do any vanilla. The only thing we put vanilla in was the milk chocolate. So after that, we put them in what's called a refiner or a melanger. And it's 2 big granite stones that turn on a granite base. And they'll stay in there for anywhere from 48 to, maybe a little bit longer, 48 hours. And what's that doing? That is crushing the nib, and the friction and heat actually bring the cocoa butter out and liquefy the nib. So seeing that connection between a pile of crushed beans, and then you don't even have to add anything. You just friction and heat to pull out the cocoa butter, and liquefying it is really kind of that magical transformation that is kind of cool to make a connection to. And we're doing nothing in there really to develop flavor, although that's happening, but we're more concerned with particle size at that point. Mm-hmm. So we work to try to get it down to about 18 microns. And that is really kind of the sweet spot for having a smooth, like chocolate that melts and you don't get any grittiness or anything like that. I think 30 is kind of where the tongue stops detecting the particle size, if you will. So 18 to 20 is kind of that sweet spot that we shoot for. It is possible to go too low. You can get the particle size too small to where it starts to fill in your taste buds and appear gummy. So it's kind of this fine line of, is it 47 hours or is it 53? So we do a lot of tasting and testing, towards the end of that, with the grind gauge and micrometers, and it's kind of a.
This is a geeky process.
It is a geeky process, yeah, which is one thing that fascinates me about it. So. And so once we have the particle size where we need, then we can go to another machine called a conch. And this is really where we have another opportunity to affect the final flavor. If we maybe haven't gotten quite all the acidity out of the product that we want, we have an opportunity at this stage. And it's really just movement with heat and airflow that we're kind of working on driving off or volatilizing some of those acids that we might want. Or sometimes we don't really have to conch at all if we've roasted right and gotten a really great roast profile. Then we don't have to spend a whole lot of time in the conch. But we typically spend another 24 hours at pretty high temperatures, and with a lot of agitation beating that chocolate. So we're helping the texture a little bit, and we're really kind of at this point fine tuning the flavor. And then at that point, it's ready to be cast into chocolate bars. And we have noticed, too, another process is we age it at that point. We've seen about 2 months is kind of the where we see a little drop-off. And we're not quite sure what's happening on a scientific level, if you will, with that. But we do see kind of the flavors mellow a little bit. They come together a little bit more. So we'll typically put them in big blocks, age them, and then in 2 months we'll cast them into bars, and they'll be ready to go out to market.
So are you self-taught? I mean, did you figure this? This is a lot of equipment. This is a lot of measurements, a lot of science going on. Is this something you learn in culinary school or restaurant management, or is this something you have to get on the internet and read books and teach yourself?
Yeah, this was something that was all self-taught, and talking to other chocolatiers and visiting, other chocolate makers. And the interesting thing about like all of the chocolate books I started reading when we were getting into this is they're all written in the, early 1900s to 1950s. There's really not a lot of new, material on the subject, or specifically geared towards a small chocolate maker. A lot of the books I would read are geared towards huge industrial manufacturing. So we have to strip out, the things we can learn from that and how do we adapt it to our much smaller equipment and process. So, and trial and error is really the best thing. So, I think we have a good palate, so we understand, we have the ability to taste something and okay, I think back at this step, we need to make this one change. If there's a particular characteristic about that bar we don't like.
I think you have a very striking palate, very well developed. Did you do anything as a kid? Where did you know that you could taste well? Do you teach yourself? Is this something you're born with, or is this something you nurture along?
I know a lot. There's some people that are born with that, and I certainly wasn't one of them. I've had to work really, really hard at, especially over the last 2 years as we've gotten into the bean to bar movement, to really think about what we're tasting, and it's practice, and it's eating, not just shoveling food in your mouth and swallowing it without thinking about it. It's really this conscious effort of what am I tasting, how am I tasting it, what are the negatives, what are the positives that I like, and being able to kind of file that in your memory bank and come back and experience experience that in another product. But it's been hard. That's been one of the hardest things for me personally, is developing that, because it doesn't come naturally for me.
I'm so surprised, because you seem like one of those people, and you also have this very intense way about diving into anything you're very interested in. So whether
Borderline
that's
obsessive,
whether it's your business of chocolate, or whether it's the extensions of it, which would be ice cream and soon to come donuts, or cocktails. I know you're a big cocktail guy. I know you're a big bocce guy, so you've got a bocce court at your house. I mean, you're one of those people who dive in and dive pretty darn deep.
Yeah, I've never been accused of doing anything halfway. So.
Well, then, speaking of, this is a great transition for, like, what made you dive into ice cream, and then we'll get into donuts. So,
Ice cream always used to be one of my favorite things to make as a pastry chef. Most of the restaurants I worked at, we had an ice cream maker, and usually one component of a plated dessert, a lot of times would be ice cream. And I like it because it's a similar process to chocolate making. It's a great flavor vehicle. Almost every chocolate flavor we've made translates into an ice cream. And we can take the same approach. We can use, real fresh ingredients, and really make these kind of bold, great flavors. And, you actually, with ice cream, to me, have a lot more leeway than chocolate as far as what you can throw at it, because it is more of a neutral flavor profile. So it's a great vehicle for pretty much anything you can think of to throw in there. And so the same process, it's developing flavors there and thinking about the texture and how we want this to eat and melt in your mouth. There's a lot of thought that goes into that.
And some of the things that you've put in there are like beer and Jude's rum cake and goat cheese, and we should say your brand is not Christopher Elbow ice cream. It's Glacé, and you're located on
at 50th and Main Street.
50th and Main, and are you open year round? I've been seeing some stuff on Instagram, even though it's a freezing cold
we're
January.
Open year round. People eat ice cream in January and February.
Yeah.
Obviously we have our busy season, but we're open year round, and the people more than likely in the wintertime come in and get pints to take home and eat in the comfort of their own home. But we still see people brave the cold and come in and eat ice cream.
And take us back. How many years ago did you start Glacé?
That was 9 years ago.
Wow, it's been that long.
Been that long, yeah, 2010.
I thought it came a little later. Yeah, okay. And so now you're talking about donuts.
Donuts, yeah.
My goodness. And coffee.
And coffee.
Okay.
And ice cream again.
Okay, so fill us in.
So we were kind of looking for another location for, to do another ice cream store. And this building that I've always loved, kind of opportunity to acquire that came on the market. And it's at 59th and Mission. It was the former Pizza 51 space, and before that, a former Sinclair gas station.
Yeah,
So
gas
it's just
station
this
dining. Ooh.
cool, yeah, it's this cool looking building that still looks like a gas station, and would love that aesthetic. So we were, and it's in a fantastic neighborhood in Fairway, a lot of families, and there's a park, close by. So ice cream, no brainer. And as we kind of were diving into, developing the business plan, people who know me know my kind of affinity for donuts. I just was like, this is too good of an opportunity not to do donuts at this location. And so we're working on we're just starting our testing this week, actually, on developing what we think is a great donut. And then we'll also be full service coffee. So we'll open at 6 a.m. And we really want to kind of be a true neighborhood destination. So, we named it Fairway Creamery, and kind of going to have somewhat of a nostalgic feel to it, as opposed to maybe the more modern, Glacé. And that will be reflected in the product as well.
So there's lots of donuts out there in the world. There's cake, there's yeast, there's sprinkled, there's adorned, there's savory, there's sweet. Where are you going? What is the perfect donut experience in Christopher Elbow's world?
So I'm a huge cake and old fashioned, like the sour cream old fashions and a cup of coffee. That could be my breakfast daily if my health would allow it. And we're going to kind of take the same approach. I think, you'll see this theme of not going overboard. I'm a big fan of do something and do it really, really well. You don't have to cover it up with a ton of toppings and things like that. So I think our you're going to see a lot of classic flavors. We'll do the lemon, we'll do maple, regular glaze. But, in our glaze, we're going to have Madagascar vanilla beans in it. So again, that one or two kind of simple, clean flavors. If we do like a raspberry glazed cake donut, we're just going to smash fresh raspberries up into the glaze. So again, getting that natural, really great flavor. But we're going to do everything. We'll do yeast raised. We'll do filled donuts, with fresh jams and pastry creams. We'll do the old fashions, and we'll keep the toppings fairly straightforward and approachable.
So it strikes me that donuts are a thing that you have to be making every single day, and you got to get them early in the morning. Whereas chocolate has a little bit more leeway. You could probably do lots of boxes and bars, a couple days before you were selling them. Same with ice cream. You can freeze it, right? So you can make it ahead of time. So how does this blow your mind in terms of putting together? This is a very different business model for you, isn't it?
It is, and I might not have thought that through really before we jumped into this.
You're all about the flavor.
I'm going to be getting up at 2 a.m. and going into make donuts. But we'll make them every morning. When we sell out, we sell out. That's kind of our plan is to make a set amount every day. It's going to be a pretty small operation, so we won't be cranking out thousands and thousands of donuts every day. But we're developing that kind of schedule right now. And, what we're working on, just to start with, is how do we make the perfect cake donut? What are the qualities of a perfect cake donut? What are the qualities of a perfect yeast donut? And then we'll think about the flavors that we put on them. So that base has to be, in my mind, kind of stand on its own. Like you could eat that plain cake donut and you're going to get this kind of crispy exterior and then the soft, crumb inside. The yeast raised donut should have a little bit of pull to it, so working on that, and again, this is back to that scientific approach of getting that down, and then we can start playing with flavors. And I think the flavors are going to be the easy part, and the icings and the glazes and the toppings.
Will people be able to see the donuts being made? I know in some places you can see it. And again, if you think about, you could see in the chocolate, you never really did see the ice cream making because that happened behind in the kitchen.
Right.
Is this also a visual thing? Will they
you
see
won't
you
really
make
be able to see it, because the way we're setting the kitchen up, it will be a little farther behind. It's still open, kind of, we're having to kind of figure out how to work the ice cream and the donut production into the same kitchen, so it's a little more challenging. But you won't really be able to sit there and watch them be made at this location.
So what's the opening date on this? Do you have one yet?
We're shooting for May, so
For May,
early May. We
Okay.
want to definitely be open by the summer, so we're moving fast on this project.
How exciting. Can't wait, and I'm sure the lines will be long. Anything else you're doing collaboration-wise or 5 years down the road? What else? What other food? Are you going to have a pizza shop?
I'm done. After this, I'm done.
Come on, you want a pizza oven, don't you? Or let's see, what else can we think of for you?
I'm sure, I've toyed around with, the cocktail thing, but I think I've determined that
Yes.
I want that to be a hobby only. I think this, the donut and new ice cream shop is going to keep us really, really busy. So I think for the foreseeable future, that's kind of where I'm gonna have some restraint and not try to do anything different.
And you are sold in many states as far as chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your reach at this point? And where does Christopher Elbow go? Is this a franchise eventually for these different businesses, or do you want to keep them
I think
in Kansas
for the
City?
chocolate shop, we'll never franchise or never, we've curated that over 16 years to kind of be what it is. And, we're still a small company. We're a small batch production, I don't see it ever changing from that. The new concept, the Fairway Creamery, I could see that being multiple locations and possibly a franchise opportunity somewhere down the road. We're certainly thinking about that as we develop the concept, and having that guide our business plan for sure. So I could see that as being something that maybe grows far beyond how big our chocolate company is at this point.
Yeah. We are very lucky to have you in Kansas City. I have to ask before we go, when do you sleep? Because that's a lot of food to be pumping out.
It is, but I have a great staff and a lot of support. So they can execute my vision. And I think that's been the key. And kind of to the Fairway Creamery concept, I just brought on Todd Schulte as kind of the
fantastic!
director
From
of operations and
Genesee Royale and Speak fame.
And I've been a big fan of his food all along the years, and he's a great guy and a hard worker. And I kind of needed, the thing about doing this now, as I'm 16 years into the business, is I kind of understand the support I need moving into a project, so I don't take all the burden, on my shoulders. And I think Todd's going to be a tremendous asset, to get this concept up and running and allow me to, possibly go out and look for location number 2 pretty shortly after the first one's open.
That's great to hear that he's joining you in this. And I wondered,
it's exciting.
Wondered where he was going to land next.
Yeah,
So that's great. And so you sleep about how many hours a day? You said
I get 7. I get a good 7 every night. So I can't function if I don't.
Wow. Well, you're such a busy guy. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in.
My pleasure.
Especially before Valentine's Day. And final question is, Valentine's Day is the biggest chocolate sales, yes? Or is there another holiday that eclipses it?
That day will be the biggest, our biggest sales day of the year. Christmas is still our biggest season, but it's, 5 weeks long of, big corporate orders. Valentine's Day is, just a bunch of dudes coming in and buying one box, at the very last minute. So don't procrastinate, and skip the line. So
hurry up and get your tattoo box.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Christopher Elbow, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Great. Okay, Jill, do you want to do a little intro real quick? This time on Chew Diligence?
Yes. This time on Chew Diligence, Christopher Elbow talks to us about Valentine's Day, chocolate, donuts, ice cream, coffee, and so much more.
I like it.
Not necessarily in that order, but...
Perfect. Sorry, I had something in my
was
throat.